Hello and welcome to Suzi's Book Bag, hosted by me, Suzifeay. I know what you're thinking. Has Christmas come early in the book bag? Can you see I am, in fact, wearing... Oh, there are the reindeer. I'm wearing a Christmas sweater. And it's because there is a scene in the novel that we are going to discuss, A Fabulous Christmas, at the end of which are extraordinary revelations. So I thought I would wear this in honour of that scene. And my very jazzy book bag is a new book bag. It's a Books Are My Bag book bag, but I sort of thought its jazziness and its spirit would somehow kind of evoke the spirit of the heroine of the novel that we're going to talk about. I'm going to invite in the very wonderful Chris Chalmers. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Suzi. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me in my book bag. And this is the book we're going to be talking about.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Fenella's Fair Share. Now, I love Fenella. She is such a terrific heroine. In fact, I'm on the... my quote is on the cover.
Indeed.
Which is, yes, a warm wit, reminiscent of Alan Bennett and Victoria Wood. Chris Chalmers has created a heroine to cherish, but she is not without her flaws, shall we say, which makes her both fun to read about and presumably fun to write about.
Definitely.
So my first question, Chris, is really, as a fiction writer, I mean, one thing is, where do you find the time? How many novels is this now? Is this novel 4 or novel 5?
Number 5 or 6, depending whether you count the children's book or not. It's number 6, I think.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, for the moment, we'll park the children's book. So 5 novels. And I know that you are very busy in your day job. So I think, I mean, are you and Anthony trollop and get up at 5 a.m. or, you know, do you sort of write in your lunch hour? How does it work?
I've been freelance. I'm an advertising copywriter. I've been freelance since about 2002, and that was when I started writing novels. And initially, because the freelance work was a bit intermittent, I used to, for example, do 2 weeks working at an ad agency, then take 2 weeks off and do 2 weeks writing the novel, and 2 weeks here, 3 weeks there, a week here, a week there, and that's how I always did it. What I didn't do was ever try to do advertising and the novel on the same day. It was I was doing one or I was doing the other, and that has how it always was, really, for all the books that I've written. The last couple of years I've actually been in full-time employment, so I haven't been writing anything else, but I think there'll be something we'll be starting soon. But yeah, I when I was having one of my writing days, I generally treat it like an office day. I would be, well, apart from rolling out of bed in my pajamas and going to my desk, which I didn't do in the office. I did used to literally roll out of bed and start writing about 8:30. I used to stop about 11, go to the gym, have some lunch, and then start again at 2 until, I think initially I used to work until the Channel 4 news at 7 o'clock. And that's when I used to stop. That was generally my schedule.
Did you have a word count? Were you one of these, I must do, 500 words a day or whatever?
I found this magical talisman number, which was 1,100. As soon as I hit 1,100, I'd nearly always had enough. I let myself stop at 1,100 because that was enough for a day.
Wow, and that's how you get 5 novels done. Admirable. Yeah. Treat it like a day job. Yeah. And are you on the computer sort of, writing straight into a document? Are you editing as you go, or are the creative bits and the editing bits separate?
Yeah, I did. I do write straight onto the laptop. I did wean myself off after about the first or second novel. Wean myself off, starting each day. Let's just read what I wrote yesterday, because then you suddenly find you spent half the day faffing about with what you wrote yesterday, and you don't get that much written. So I managed to stop doing that, and I didn't really reread things until I got to the end of the first draft. The first draft I always found like climbing a mountain, and really I was doing it in order to enjoy the absolute abject pleasure of doing later drafts, which I completely loved, because when you're working on a later draft of a novel you've already written, essentially, whenever you go to bed, you're always going to bed and the book is better than it was when you woke up that morning, because all you're ever doing is improving it, polishing it, cutting it, and making it better. The editing I found an absolute redrafting I found an absolute pleasure. Writing the first draft I found like pulling teeth.
But that also, I mean, that gives rise to another question. I mean, do you know where you're going when you're writing that first draft? Have you, I mean, you know, some people, I know our mutual friend Paul Burston, I mean, he once told me that he was a plotter out. This character's gonna come in here, they're gonna have a confrontation there. Do you just launch yourself?
I know. I don't launch myself. I do always have a plan. I'm not a kind of 400 post-its on the wall kind of guy. I don't have that much of a plan, but I do have probably a 3-page synopsis of this happens, these are characters, and this happens in this order. I have never I've never been brave enough to start a book without knowing where it would end up. I have full admiration for people who do that. I just my greatest fear is kind of getting halfway through a sort of 80,000 word book thinking, I have no idea what happens now, or oh, this isn't going to make sense, or I couldn't bear that idea. So I always know it'll, broadly speaking, work before I start.
Brilliant. And you know, you mentioned advertising copywriting. I mean, that almost sounds like more like poetry to me, or even a short story. How do those? I mean, do you find it interesting to work in one, you know, writing field and then change to something totally different? Do they interact in some way?
I think I'm a better novelist for having been for 25 years as I was when I started an advertising copywriter. I think copywriting teaches you to be concise beyond anything else, because any word you can axe when you're writing advertising headlines and slogans and copy is good. I mean, anything to make it shorter is always good, because attention spans are so short. So I only think it's been positive that I had that kind of background. What I'd be interested to know is whether the novels have made my copywriting any better. I don't think it has particularly. I must admit, when I started writing novels, because I you know, in the attempt to publicize yourself, inevitably people in the industry find out that you write novels, and I always thought, oh, I bet I end up getting offered loads of like long copywriting jobs now, because people know that I can write, you know, thousands of words. It never happened though. I don't know. Maybe there just aren't that many long copy jobs around, but I thought I'd be in demand for that, but that never happened.
Brilliant. Well, let's get on to lovely Fenella. Fenella's Fair Share, fifth novel for grown-ups, adults. Yeah. I mean, what I loved about it is that, I mean, it seems to be been quite bold, because you've chosen a heroine kind of really in midlife. A lot of fairy tales end and they all lived happily ever after. Even some famous literary novels, Reader, I Married Him, you know, all these sort of things, that they take people up to the start of almost their adult life. But I think it's fascinating to pick somebody who's had a good deal of life. Well, introduce us to Fenella and her situation at the start of the novel.
Yeah, Fenella is at the start of the novel. She's 49. And she is house sharing. She previously owned her own place, but for reasons that are explained in the novel, she ends up going back into shared accommodation, largely because she's single and she feels like she needs a bit more social interaction in her life. And she ends up sharing with people, perhaps inevitably, who are a bit younger than her. So she's, as the novel starts, she's sharing with two people in their 20s, a young man, a young woman. And there's a fourth bedroom in the house which has come free, so they need to fill it with another housemate. Basically, Fenella inveigles somebody a bit near her own age into the household, sort of balance things out a bit as she sees it.
Yes, Fenella. She's sort of a bit of an operator, isn't she? Or thinks she is, but a lot of plans and schemes go awry.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many interesting aspects to her. There's also her job, which is at an art gallery. And again, with this kind of youth versus age thing going on, her expertise and her experience is kind of being overlooked, in favour of, but this young person will bring fresh ideas, and they're so flexible.
Yes. A situation one becomes very familiar with when you're an older statesman in advertising. Yes.
Right. Okay. I mean, there's a little bit about printing brochures and printing flyers where I thought maybe you had expertise of your own in kind of costing out things and, how things look. Why write a woman? Which, I mean, you have done before, but not just kind of a young woman finding her way, but a mature woman, which I have to say, I think you do brilliantly well. But how did you feel taking on that challenge?
I do it because I find it quite easy. It just comes to me quite naturally. I think, I'm like most novelists, I'm a big observer of people, and there's as many women pass through my life that I'm observing as men, and so I just find myself absorbing a great deal of stuff about women, particularly sort of around about my own age, or in midlife, because working in an industry with lots of different people coming, especially when you're freelance, people coming and going all the time. You just take lots of stuff in. So yeah, I probably am supposed to find it hard, but I just don't.
I think her references, how she goes about her day and the sort of things she thinks are really, on point and really relatable. And we should also bring in her mum at this point, because I think the mother-daughter relationship is just superb. It's got the guilt, it's got the love, it's got the irritation. And the mum is a strong character in her own right. How do you sort of put it together? Was there always going to be a mum in this novel?
I'm a firm believer in the old cliche of writing what you know, and the last couple of novels, in fact, I have found myself casting around thinking, okay, what do I know a lot about that I haven't actually written about before? And in this case, I've a very dear friend of mine who has MS. And because I'm very close to her, I've ended up knowing quite a lot about it. And I just thought, I'd quite like to have somebody in the book who's struggling with MS, and I can use the sort of knowledge that I've gained. So Fen's mum has MS, and she's in a wheelchair, and she's nonetheless completely indefatigable. Is not going to let life beat her, and is if anything a stronger character even than her daughter is.
And the other thing about the MS storyline, if we can call it that, is it is a storyline because it is going to develop in a certain very sad way, and it is going to end in a sad way. And it not
quite as sad as you might be implying. It's not terminal, but
well, I mean, I just found it sort of mirrors Fenella very cleverly. Right. They're both, then in a way they're moving into uncharted waters, and we will get on to cruising. Okay. Which is an important part of this book, but there's something about the two women both sort of moving into a future that has some questions over it that I found structurally, I found it a very interesting storyline, and again really beautifully well done, because like I say, they are bound together by the sort of love and a mutual irritation in a way. It's not just Fenella getting a bit annoyed with her mum's antics. I mean, in other books that you've written as well as this one, do you sort of look around for news stories, or do you look around for things that are in the air right now? I mean, this idea of Fenella, having to bunk up with these youngsters feels kind of a now storyline in a way.
This was totally inspired by a news story that I read. In fact, I've still got the link to it. It was on the BBC website one day, and it was about how it was at the time when people were struggling to get mortgages because the interest rates were just so ridiculous. I read that this was a current phenomenon of older people staying in shared accommodation much longer than they used to, and older people for various reasons ending up back in it. But the thing that they thought they'd left in their 20s, you know, suddenly they end up house sharing again. So I thought this was fertile territory.
And Fen lives in Wimbledon, which is an area that you know well, so it's a kind of nice portrait of the area. Is Wimbledon, I mean, it's sort of in its strange two halves, isn't it? Like the very posh half, and then the sort of, you know, the place where the ordinary people live, if you like.
Yes,
have you set other books in Wimbledon?
Yes, the previous one, The Last Lemming, was set in Wimbledon, possibly at a gym just around the corner from my house. And then there was an elements of it on Wimbledon Common. And so it's like a previous book to that was set largely up in the village as well. So yes, I do tend, as I say, I do tend to use what I know. I'm more confident in that. I never write about anywhere that I haven't been. So there is quite a lot of travel in my books, but I only ever write about places if I've been to them.
Yes, well, I remember dinner at the Happy Skeleton, which is another favourite of your books. One of my favourites. Where is that? Is that Croatia or
Slovenia?
Slovenia,
and,
yeah.
Yes.
And again, it really shows that, you know, you've been there, you've had some of the experiences. Yes, so the generational clash thing. Again, this is about people that are different. They're at different stages of their life, and people. So the plot being that Fenella has inveigled a nice older-ish man into the house, brings us into the kind of romantic subplot, shall we say, where she's sort of keeping up her end with the younger people in the house who are sort of off socializing, but that all goes a little bit wrong, and I believe that this was also part of the spur of the novel, because one of the things that happens is if somebody dumps someone, this is true in life, isn't it? If a friend dumps somebody, the last thing you should say is, thank God you got rid of her/him. You know, I always disliked them. They weren't right for you. I mean, it's just something you should never do, isn't it?
No, because 2 weeks later, guess what could happen? Yes, that actually happened to me, and that was the other spur of the novel. I spoke about somebody when I probably should have kept my mouth shut, because they got back together.
We've all done it.
Away, but yes, it's one of those rites of passage. If you're a bit dobby, really, you're just likely to put your foot in it eventually, aren't you? Yeah,
exactly. So Fenella is sort of she's on this journey. I mean, she's also literally on a journey, because she gets on to, her and Mum go on a cruise, and that is so well observed. And again, you must have cruised the Norwegian fjords, I'm imagining.
That was the very first cruise we did. Yes, we did that for my 50th birthday. Yeah. So
what is it about cruising that you presumably love?
I do love it. I like anybody, you start out thinking, I've no idea if I'm going to like this. Cruising is a Marmite thing, isn't it? People love it or they hate it. And we booked our first cruise mainly because we want to see the Norwegian fjords, and the best way to see the fjords is from the water. So obviously it's good to be on a boat. And the other reason Norway is so expensive, if you can eat your meals on a boat, you want to eat your meals on a boat. It's not paid for. So that was our first cruise, and my other half and I both absolutely blooming loved it. Not knowing if we were going to, we were total converts, and we've done a few since, and we'll happily be doing more.
And can you do you find that you strike up onboard friendships quite easily, or are you sort of keeping yourself to yourself and sort of thinking, oh God, it's them again? You know, how does that work?
we go out of our way not to strike up any onboard friendships. Yes. And the thing is, the bigger the ship, the easier that is to do, because they're so enormous. You know, we're talking 4,000 cruisers and 2,000 staff. You can literally go the week and see somebody once, and you won't set eyes on them again, because it's just so big. It's a floating town, and we like the anonymity of it. It's people think it's terribly confining, but we actually found it the opposite. It was really quite liberating, because you don't need to talk to people if you don't want to, because you probably won't see them again.
What about dinner with the captain? Do you sort of, get all gussied up? And
yeah, I've always avoided that, actually. I haven't been on quite that pricey a cruise line where you're like, you had to wear all that stuff. So no, we haven't really. Slightly half-hearted, the odd jacket comes out, but that's all.
Do you have a kind of destination in mind for the next one?
The thing about cruising is, one of the things I like very best about it is the fact that there aren't airports and airplanes involved. But that does mean you need to start them in the UK, because any of the bigger ones, you need to fly somewhere, get on the boat, and do the cruise. So we're slightly running out of places from the UK that we can do. I think we've already done what we thought was just about the best cruise that you could possibly do, which was from Santiago, Chile, around the bottom of South America.
Oh,
up
yes.
To past the glaciers, or what's left of them, at Tierra del Fuego, Patagonia. So we've done that one, and I'm yet to see anything that makes people think, oh my god, that'll be even better. But I would like to do a sort of an Arctic one. The country I want to go to most, which I've not yet been to, is Japan, but I'm just not sure kind of doing it from a boat and only getting off for 8 hours in various places is the best way to do it. So probably wouldn't do that as a cruise. So yeah.
Yes. Now, this is quite a few years ago, but I once introduced Howard Jacobson as a comic novelist, and he took great offence. And I think he seemed to think that I was sort of minimising the impact of his books by saying that they're comedic, which I obviously never intended to do. And I would say broadly, you're also a comic novelist. There's a lot of humour in your novels, but it doesn't preclude the darkness.
Yes.
I mean, would you own up to that?
I absolutely. I without wishing to blow my own trumpet, I do find them very funny. But they're all my jokes in there, so hopefully I will find them funny. It's just something that seems to come out. I don't try to write funny things, but it just seems to be when I write, that's what comes out. Things that have a slightly amusing edge to them, or things about characters. What I love best when I'm reading books, and also when I'm writing books, is characters who you think, oh God, I know somebody just like that. Oh, that's exactly what people like that are like. Oh, spot on, nail on the head. And for me, that's the best sort of writing, and that's the sort of writing I try to do.
I think the reason I came up with Victoria Wood as in the quotes that I gave you is, I don't know if it is Victoria Wood, but there's that whole idea that if you just mention biscuits, that's not funny, but if you mention gypsy creams, that immediately becomes funny. And maybe there's a touch of the sort of ad man in this, but it seems that some of your references are just so spot on and so funny, and they just sort of pinpoint exactly who Fenella is and how she goes about her day. I mean, I think you were probably delighted with the comparison, weren't you?
Absolutely, I was thrilled. Yes, I mean, yeah.
Big fan.
Yes, completely. A tragic loss, honestly. Just. Yes, big fan. But that if you feel like that says to me mission accomplished, because that is exactly what the effects that I hope to get from people reading my books.
Oh yes, I mean, there's a very odd detail in the garden of the house where she's staying, which is it contains a grave. Now, somebody else might have this as a murder mystery, or somebody under the patio, but again, this is a sort of whimsical touch of humour. So where did that idea come from?
I do have, like most writers, I do have a little black book in which I write sort of little snippety things that occur to me. And once years ago, I evidently wrote down, God, you can actually legally bury somebody in your back garden. They can't stop you if you get the right permission. You can actually do that. And so I wrote that down, and I did indeed end up using it in this novel. Because the landlord, the owner of the house, his first wife is buried in the back garden, and this is something as is explained in the first couple of chapters. Every time a new tenant comes and interviewed, the first thing they think is, "Oh my God, there's a grave in the back garden." But once you move in, you get completely used to it, and like use it to put your drinks on, and yeah, it's true. You can do
that. I mean, that's sort of like having a permanent house guest, really. In this house where people are coming and going the whole time, there's this rather strange permanent resident.
Yes. And being pivotal to the plot at one point, as you might remember.
It is, yes. There's a scene. There's a scene involved in this. Well, I would like to think about some of your other novels. I mean, again, prompted by news stories. 5 to 1. Was that the helicopter crash in London that prompted that? And again, that's sort of quite serious subject matter, isn't it? That's a little bit darker as a book.
Yeah, it's about a helicopter crash on Clapham Common, and it wasn't inspired by that, because there was a helicopter incident with a tall building in Vauxhall about 2 miles ago, but that happened afterwards. So no.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, see, I read it after oh gosh.
Yeah, that was a horrible coincidence. No, 5 to 1 was inspired by a couple of very specific incidents, though, which was there was originally an extra character in 5 to 1 who I had to write out because they were superfluous. But this character lived in a flat overlooking the common, as I lived in at the time. And one day I was at home in my flat, in the kitchen, which was at the back of the flat, when I heard what to this day remains the loudest bang I've ever heard in my life, and the entire building shook. And I thought, I don't know what the hell that was, but I hope the building's not coming down. It transpired a black cab had driven off the road through the front window of the shop downstairs, and through the exact spot where 2 or 3 times a day I'm standing on the doorstep putting my key in the lock. And that brought home to me the fact that, you know, there but the grace of God goes any of us. We think nothing's happening in our life, and the next thing you know, you could be front page news kind of thing. And it was that, and it was shenanigans of MPs getting up to things they shouldn't have done on the Clapham Common, and seeing the road sign across the road from my flat on the front cover of the Sunday Times the next week. Just thinking, God, news actually does happen to real people. It's not all fantasy. So that was the inspiration behind 5 to 1.
I mean, even in Wimbledon, fairly recently, there was a terrible crash at a school, wasn't there? So again, Wimbledon was in the headlines, and it's just sort of extraordinary. So when you take something like that, I mean, I read it quite a long time ago. I think there are still the lighter elements, but overall, it's a more serious book, isn't it? What's the sort of atmosphere like when you're writing the more serious stuff? Are you sort of glad to sort of shake it off at the end of the day?
I've never gone too far down that route. There's nothing too doomy in any of them. There's sort of serious sides. One of them's got a murder in it, but it's not a murder mystery. It's just so no, I don't let it affect me too much. I'm not a fan of sort of nasty, gratuitous horror films or anything like that. I'm not likely to write anything that's a bit too stretching on that score.
So the other one I wanted to talk about, I did want to talk about the Happy Skeleton. Is that in a sense slightly different from other books that you've written? Because it seems is it more personal in a way, would you say?
It was the first book I ever wrote, and like many authors, it was you draw upon your autobiographical treasure chest extensively for your first book. I certainly did. There's an awful lot of stuff that kind of happened to me in that, albeit kind of stuff that's happened over 3 or 4 years that gets telescoped into 3 months in the duration of the book. But yes, it was. It was very much, it was the easiest novel I ever wrote, in the sense that I wrote it the most quickly. I wrote it in about 6 or 7 months, and I kind of thought, hey, this is all right. I'm only going to get better now. They're going to get even shorter. This is how wrong I was. They've always got harder, longer to finish. But yes, that was my most personal novel, you might say. I think that's also the closest one to being truly a comic novel.
Was it published out of sequence then, or was it republished?
I think it was, yeah. The 5 to 1 was published first, but Didn't Have Skeleton was the first one I wrote, but it wasn't published.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, that's quite good in a way, isn't it? Because like you say, it is a bit of a cliche to have your debut novel to be based on your own life. So to publish it out of sequence, well, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I remember we had a conversation actually where I went, "What about that bit? Is that sort of based on? Is that based on what happened?" And you'd go, "Oh yes, oh." So
Yes. I'm a soul of respectability now, but I just have a little bit of a colourful past.
Yes, exactly. It's all about the colourful past, which is And The Last Lemming is sort of you had a word for this, and I can never remember the word. What's
cryptozoology?
That's it. Cryptozoology. Explain about cryptozoology, please.
This is an absolutely prime example of Chris thinking, I want to write a new book. I've written about a lot of things. What do I know a lot about that I can write a book about? And I came up with 2 things. Cryptozoology, which is the study of undiscovered animals like the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, which always fascinated me ever since I was a little boy. And going to the gym, which is something I've always done a lot. And so I thought, right, gym culture and cryptozoology, discuss and write a book. And to my absolute astonishment, it works. I got a plot out of these 2 completely disparate themes. Basically the central character was a girl who's a personal trainer at a gym, who's bored of her job and retraining to be a journalist. So she ends up investigating the story behind a national treasure natural history TV presenter.
Yes, and a celebrated house.
Who on his deathbed confessed that the wildlife discovery that made him famous was a hoax, and so she investigated why on earth did he did this, and what was it all about 20 years earlier.
It's almost an Attenborough-like shock to the nation, isn't it?
I position him at more sort of Bill Oddie level than Attenborough.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
Venerable, but he thought he was a bit of a big shot, yeah.
No dissing of Bill Oddie. We love Bill Oddie, obviously.
Bill Oddie is a lovely man.
Yes, exactly. Well, let's go back to Fenella, because I think she's a really interesting character. Does the character develop as you write, or was this idea right at the beginning that she kind of puts her foot in it? She's well-meaning, but she does seem to sort of grate on the other characters a little bit.
Perhaps a little bit lacking in filter of knowing how she's being received by everybody else. But yes, I think when I came up with the character, everything was filtered through that, and it was okay. So what would you do in this situation? Oh, okay, I know what you do in this situation. Yeah,
but she's not. I mean, she's not a mean person. I think lacking filter is quite a good way to put it, because she tends to blurt things out. It's a bit like the thing about the friend whose partner you start slagging off. What is her arc, would you say? What does she? I mean, she has to sort of learn something as the plot goes on. So how do you kind of navigate that?
I think by joining what's happening to her at work with her personal life. which gives the opportunity for, without giving too much away, what the change of circumstance that happens 3/4 of the way through.
Mm. And let's talk about Christmas. So I think it's a sort of fantastic comic scene, and Christmas is a bit of a gift to comic writers in a way.
Yes.
It's a time when people are thrown together, and in the novel, and let's not go into what the revelation is, but there is a revelation that ends up with people needing to hit the Christmas sherry quite heavily.
Yes.
Have you been through awful family Christmases yourself?
Not really. No, I don't think I've ever.
What is
really
it about Christmas?
I don't know. I don't think I've written a Christmas scene before, so I was quite keen to do that. Christmas always feels to me like just like a day out of time. It's kind of like, it's not like any other day of the year, and even as an adult, it still feels like something that's in its own bubble, where things might get said that they wouldn't get said any other day of the year, perhaps. But yes, it seemed like an opportunity for some quite pivotal stuff that happens.
And it's a glimpse into the life of the mum, who in her own way is as outspoken and unfiltered as Fenella is. So we kind of see where Fenella gets it from. Do you have to be fond of a character like Fenella? I mean, have you written any evil characters or characters that you really dislike?
Not really. Not really. This is probably all writers will say this, but I can see an element of myself in just about every character I've ever written. I don't think I'm evil, so I don't think any of them are truly evil, because I'm not. I don't think I could do a horrible serial killer multi. I don't think I could do that. I wouldn't feel that. I don't think I would do it justice, because I wouldn't really know where to come from. I also don't like the idea of spending your working life with your head immersed in that world. I don't want to be. I don't want to be writing in a sort of charnel house imagination. I prefer writing about sort of stuff that's a bit more real and everyday.
Yeah, and upbeat. I mean, they say if you go to the Crime Writers Festival in Harrogate, everybody's extraordinarily jolly. Apparently, the crime writers are great fun to hang out with. I mean, maybe they just, they just get rid of all this stuff in their work, and then
have a great time the rest of the time. Yeah.
That's what I've heard. And then conversely, there's the sort of tears of a clown thing, but I don't think you have that. Maybe because the storylines in your books are very balanced. It's not all, PG Woodhouse type of thing. It's not all raw out loud. I mean, again, Fenella has some really painful moments in the novel, but she has those moments because she has to learn from them.
Yes.
That's her arc, I think. So without going into where she actually goes, it's very touching the way you kind of guide her through these difficult transitional periods. So what are you coming up with next? Are you the sort of person, when you end something, you immediately have to have another project on the go, or do you have a little rest and go on a cruise?
Yeah, I'm the sort of person who every time he ends something, he's kidding himself, because you haven't ended it. Because I could do another draft into infinity. I could pick any of my books off the shelf now, open any page and say, oh, I can't believe you used that word. Oh, not a comma there. I could fiddle forever. But no, once it has finally gone to print, no, I like a break. I'm on a bit of an extended break at the moment. I wasn't really expecting to be working for the last year and a half full time, but I have been. But that's not going to be forever, and I do anticipate that I'll start something new next year. I do have a little black book full of kind of like sentences and one-liners and sort of thoughts and ideas, but I absolutely have no idea at all what I'm going to write next. But then I never do before I start, and I always think I can't. I always start by thinking I'm sitting at the bottom of a mountain, looking up, thinking I can't believe I'm going to do this again. But I am. I know I'm going to do it, and because I've done it a few times, and I know I do always get to the top. I know I will finish it, and I will get to the top. But it doesn't stop being tough, so I don't mind not doing it for.
Yeah. And what about kind of fictional inspiration? I know you're a real fan of biographies and autobiographies and memoirs and that kind of thing. But what do you read in terms of fiction? I mean, do you read to sort of do something that's totally different from what you do, or do you look for tips and tricks in what you read?
I always say I am always trying to write the books I want to read, because I struggle to find exactly the sort of novels I like, and I couldn't even really describe to you what it is I like, apart from I could name a few that I think, no, that was really good. I've recently, as you say, I've recently found biographies a lot more satisfying, and maybe just with biographies there's not the pressure to have the sort of narrative structure and the payoff of everything, so it doesn't really matter. They're just kind of entertainment. Whereas novels, fiction, I get quite cheesed off if I think, oh, but they haven't finished this off, and but we could have done without those 50 pages. What were they there for? And we didn't need those. And yeah, I'm really difficult to please. I wish I wasn't. It's an absolute nuisance, but that's the way I am.
So are there any kind of writers that you've really loved? I mean, going back in the past, I mean, let's go back to, did you always want to be a writer? And if so, how did that come about? I mean, a writer of novels.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a writer. It was the only thing at school I was any good at, was creative writing. I did a degree that had an element of that. And then I kind of got, inevitably, practically, you have to earn some money. So I ended up in advertising, because, well, it's sort of writing, and it's sort of a bit creatively satisfying. I personally never found it that creatively satisfying, but it's better than digging coal, I guess. But yes, I did always want to be a writer. It took me being made redundant to actually take the plunge and try and write a novel, when I suddenly had sort of this sort of career crossroads. And to my amazement, I managed to pull it off with the first book, because I never thought I would be able to complete one. So yes, it's progressed since then.
Well, I suppose the thing about the advertising career is you are working to a brief, and you are working to bosses. So to extend that into novels, do you sort of study the market, or think what's on trend and write in that direction, or write for a particular, publisher's kind of brief?
What I'm not drawn to, and I wish I was, but I'm not really drawn to certain genres that tend to be very popular. And whilst getting published is always terribly hard, there are certain genres where I'd say it's a tiny bit less hard. If you can do crime and police procedurals and that sort of thing. I just don't have the brain for it. I read some of those and I just think, I couldn't have come up with this in a million years. My brain doesn't do this, and I'm completely in awe of people who can do it, but it's not what I can do. So no, I write what I think I'm good at, and what comes to me relatively easily. And if it's a success, great. If it's not, well, I've still done what I wanted to do at the end of the day.
So what have you read in the biography or memoir field recently that's really stuck with you?
The most recent one I've read is a book about Keir Starmer, since he was made Prime Minister, because I realised I don't know anything about Keir Starmer. He's our Prime Minister. I could honestly tell you two things about him. So I read that, and I enjoyed that. It was very informative. I came out of it thinking he's a pretty decent guy. On that score, a few years ago, one that I read that I absolutely loved was a book that Kamala Harris wrote. Before, I think it was she wrote it before she became Biden's VP, but I read it when she was the VP, I think, and I was most impressed with her. I thought it was a bit like that. You remember those books that Barack Obama wrote that just made you think, "Whoa, this is a really decent guy. This is the kind of person who should be in charge of a country." Mentioning no names at the moment. I thought she just has her background of the kind of cases she'd been involved in, like Obama. She was an attorney. She was legal trained, and just did really cool things for minorities and people who really needed help. And I just always thought, oh, she's the sort of person who should be president one day. It didn't happen, did it?
No, it didn't. Well, both of those are political choices. Do you sort of bring a kind of soft politics into your novels at all? I mean, you've got fairly fervent beliefs, I would say.
Yeah, I not in any obvious sense. Perhaps that's something I'll come to one day, because I do take an interest in politics and read a lot about it, and it's a relatively recent thing. But yeah, perhaps that's something I will get into one day.
And another thing I know you're very much into is like maybe to be more frivolous, like pop star, actor, autobiographies and memoirs, that kind of thing. Yeah. Anything in that line that you've enjoyed recently?
I'm very mired in my musical tastes of the 1980s, which have never really gone away. We have a portrait of a very young Gary Newman on the wall behind me, who's my absolute idol, and always will be, I think. The music on my earbuds every day is firmly from that era. Yeah, I love biographies of people who meant a lot to me when I was young, or people who meant a lot to me then and have carried on, having a career for all these so many years. Yeah, I'm fairly popular culture of a certain age is very much my thing.
Standout of the genre?
Let me think. Oh yes, surprisingly, Martin Kemp of Spandau Ballet. Now later went on to be an actor in EastEnders. Produced a memoir a year or two ago, hardback, in the most horrible candy pink color, with a slightly cheesy name, but I can't remember what it was, something slightly cheesy. And I thought
it wasn't, to cut a long story short, was it?
It wasn't nearly as witty as that, Suzi. It was something back to the 80s or something, or yeah. And I thought, oh well, I'll read this, but I suspect it's fairly awful. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and I laughed all the way through it. And yes, I thought he came across as a very amusing individual. I enjoyed that a lot.
You also liked Spare. I remember us talking about Spare when that came out, because I mean, that it strikes me that you're not a natural monarchist, but then maybe that is why you liked Spare.
I'm a bit of a fence sitter on the royals, possibly a little bit less so now, but I used to be very, I find them quite entertaining, and I don't really care. People have got a booth with them because it is all quite amusing, really. But I went into the Prince Harry one with completely open mind, and came down very firmly on his side of the fence from what he'd written. Yeah, I found that a total page turner. I literally couldn't put it down. Yes, it was eye-opening. Of course, everything's moved on since then, and I'm sure there's another book in the works, and I don't know if I'll be quite as pro with the next one, but yeah, I enjoyed that a lot.
Brilliant. Okay, Christmas is sort of vaguely coming up. Have you got anything on your wish list, anything literary that you would like to find in your stocking this year?
I have put a couple of books on my wish list. I'm sort of half interested in reading Theresa May's autobiography. I'm not at all interested in reading Boris's autobiography. I'd rather, chuck it out the window.
Pins in eyes moment. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I've read all the books on Trump I can take, and I've read a lot of those. No, there are a couple of books on my list, but they've gone straight out of my head. I can't remember what they were. I'm constantly waiting for the new book by Sarah Waters, who I love.
Aren't we all?
It never seems to get any nearer, does it, Suzi?
I did see her at a do, and she sort of said she was hard at work. I think I relayed the information to you. Yeah, I mean, it can be all the sweeter, the longer you wait. Susanna Clarke is another one, you see. They these little things. I mean, Piranesi I thought was sensational. Did you read Piranesi?
No.
Yeah, I mean, we had to wait a long time for Piranesi, and it was absolutely worth it. And then I think the latest thing is a little short story. So, I mean, some writers like to keep us hanging, you know. But that's why the whole question of how people write fiction is very interesting, because there's no one size fits all. You know, I was actually at an event with the Irish writer Christine Dwyer Hickey. And I don't think she's like this all the time, but what she said was she had to bribe herself to sit down and write in the early stages of a book. Like, right. You know, just do it for half an hour and then you can, you know, have a cocktail or something. I mean, her latest book is pretty fat, so she obviously gets over that hurdle. But and another one was, I think it was Kamila Shamsi, who once told me that she writes bare bones in the first draft and then adds on. And a lot of people are the other way around, aren't they? You know, the first draft is the splurge.
Yeah.
And then the editing comes in. So there is no, you know, you must do it this way. But I admire the discipline of treating it like a day job.
Yes.
And presumably your lovely partner is not sort of, can you go and, you know, fetch the dry cleaning? I mean, one thing I've often found as a freelancer is that people can tend to think that your day is free to run lots of errands and do little jobs. And then you think, well, if I did all that, I wouldn't actually do any writing or any work, you know.
Yes. You can do it, you're free. Yeah.
Exactly. You can do it, you're free. Could you just go and pick up?
Yeah.
It's something I think a lot of writers say that they have to fight.
Yeah.
They have to fight again. What do you do all day? You know.
Yeah. I'm in the lucky, if that's the word, position of being married to somebody who's also freelance. We have no choice but to split the duties between us. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Somebody with somewhat different musical tastes, would it be fair to say?
Very, very tolerant of my own particular taste. Yeah, he's a classical concert pianist and composer. He remembers the 80s, and there's the odd record that he sort of begrudgingly will say, "Oh, that Aha record. That is a very clever record," and he'll explain to me why it's very clever. But yeah, we're on slightly different poles musically.
Whereas we just like Morton Harket, you know. We're not interested in the progression of the chords or anything like that. We just
just can't take my eyes off him. I'm just not even listening. But yeah,
we just like Morton Harket. Should we talk briefly about Doctor Who?
Oh,
I know you're a fan.
I am. Yes.
And you've read the novels, I believe, or some of the novelizations.
I've read all the novels from the original series up to 1989. I'm less of a fan of the current Doctor Who, this century's Doctor Who, which goes over my head rather. I think you need to be an intelligent 11-year-old, and I'm not. That's a part of my childhood that never really went away. I don't know what this says about me, probably nothing good, but there you go, that's how it is.
I mean, my take, and I'm not really a watcher or a fan, my take, if ever I see it, it just looks too glossy now. I actually liked the sort of
the wobbly certs.
Yeah, I love the wobble. I love the rocks that wobbled, and I love the monsters that are clearly people in latex masks. That, but again, maybe that's a childhood thing. Maybe you sort of go back to what you liked back in the day. But the sort of big budget is leaving me cold. Really,
I feel the concentration is on the how it looks, and not really on the writing and the storylines, which I just find. Yeah, I don't really understand what was going on there, but it's finished now, so there we go. Yeah.
Yes, there is actually a little bit in Fenella, isn't there, where they're bemusedly watching, I think, a Christmas special and trying to...
Yes, indeed. Yes, Christmas Day Doctor Who. Yes, I do get a bit of that in, don't I? Yes. A little bit of Doctor Who satire there, if anybody knows that Doctor Who.
Exactly, yes, and you do it quite well. I mean, the reference to it is yes, that could actually happen in the current Doctor Who. too. Oh.
Yeah, I think it's cannibalistic teddy bears and the DNA of Catherine the Great, and all just kind of rings like
All makes
something
perfect sense.
something David Tennant might have said. Yeah.
Do you have a favourite Doctor?
Everybody's favourite Doctor is the Doctor that they was Doctor when they were around 8 or 9, and in my case that was John Pertwee. So he's always been one. As a rule of thumb, that generally works with original Doctor Who, maybe even with new Doctor Who, for all I know. Yeah.
Yes. With honourable mention, I feel for Tom Baker.
Yes.
With the scarf. I mean, he was a memorably zany Doctor.
Yeah, John Pertwee had particular resonance for me because my late father was on a ship with him in the Second World War, and he knew John Pertwee long before he was famous. And he has some quite good stories about John Pertwee, who was a real character even then, even before he became a famous radio actor as he was, and then eventually television actor.
I think some kind of personal eccentricity needs to feed into the character, which Tom Baker certainly had. I mean, I like that idea that they're already slightly zany people put into this role. That's what seems to work best.
Yes.
Right. Let us move along to the final 3 questions that I ask everybody. Now, you've mentioned that right behind you there's a lovely picture of Gary Newman. I was wondering whether that was your favourite artwork. It's certainly very striking. What have you gone for? Well,
I've got a choice of 2, and I couldn't decide. So shall I go through them both very quickly?
Why not?
Well, not Gary Newman, but something else that you mentioned. I thought it does feature as a particular favourite, and it's something I acquired in the last couple of weeks, which is. The helmet of a robot from Doctor Who from the 1978 story, The Robots of Death.
Really frightening.
I absolutely love it. It always was my favourite Doctor Who monster, and I found somebody online who was making these from the original molds. So I can actually get it on, believe it or not. And yes, this character was called D84, and he was one of my favourites and one of my favourite piece of design from Doctor Who.
Go on, put it on. Does it easily fit on, or is it a faff one?
I've just got to remove the bulldog clip, which is holding the back on.
Oh, this is a good book bag moment. Wow.
How about that?
Wow, you are sorted for Halloween for years to come. That is actually brilliant. Can you see out through the eye holes?
Yes, it makes me have tremendous respect for actors, because the idea of spending this thing is just
amazing. Amazing. Right, what was the other one?
The other one, well, it's not quite art, but it is architecture, which is my favourite building in the whole world, which I happen to have just here, which is Hallgrim's Cathedral in Reykjavik. Right. Can you see that okay?
I can, yes. So what era is that?
Well, it was designed in the 1930s, but apparently it wasn't finished until the 1980s. And it's quite kind of typical Scandinavian church design, with these kind of fluted sort of organ pipes creating the steeple. And it is still to this day the tallest building in Reykjavik. It's something like 75 meters tall. And when you come in from the airport, driving towards Reykjavik, it's the only thing on the horizon, because it's the only tall building that you can see, and it just kind of stands there like a little chess piece, it's sort of dominating the city. And I always just thought it was the most beautiful building, and that's my favorite.
Have you been inside?
I've been inside. Yeah, it's kind of
inside as well.
Yes, it's sort of Scandinavian austere architecture on the inside, but yes, it's very cool. And I've been to Reykjavik a couple of times, and I just have to go and look at it as soon as I get there, because I just think it's amazing.
What on earth are you doing in Reykjavik? Just because you like it?
Yeah, just because I like it, because it's a cool place to be. I keep waiting for my other half to get a concert there, and it keeps nearly happening and just doesn't quite happen. But very, very keen to go back as soon as possible.
Absolutely brilliant. And of course, 50 years isn't too bad as building a cathedral. If you think of Sagrada Familia, and
yes, it's beaten that one, isn't it?
Yeah, and also Milan. I think that took centuries and centuries and
Oh, right.
centuries to build the Duomo of
I
Milan. So,
can believe that.
so well done, well done. That's a great pair of artworks.
Thank you.
Right. Well, we've been talking a little bit about books, but Book of Shame, the gap in your reading.
Well,
What are you going to confess to?
Well, I mean, the gap is enormous. Lots of classic things that I should have read and haven't read. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, actually, what would really be interesting to do would be to go back to some of the things that I read. I had very bad memories of education and the books that I was taught, and I kind of almost completely didn't enjoy any of them. I don't know if it was that feeling of kind of having your arm forced up your back. You will read this. You will write essays on it. It just immediately puts me on defensive, and I thought, no, I'm not going to enjoy this. But when I did my degree, I did an awful lot of sort of Victorian English. We did Hard Times by Dickens, Felix Holt, Mary Barton, things like this. I just remember as just like being slowly tortured, actually. And I think it can't possibly have been that bad. And I really ought to go back to them and see if perhaps as an older person, maybe they will mean more to me now, and get the enjoyment out of them that I'm sure people do. I feel like I'm missing out, but I want to know, I want to see them from a different perspective, perhaps.
So the shame is, in a way, that not that you haven't read them, but you didn't maybe get them in the fullest way.
I miss out. I don't quite know how I passed my degree, really, but I did, thank goodness. Yeah.
I mean, I can empathise with that because we managed to do Emma. I'm pretty sure about. I think we did Emma twice. I have a feeling that we did Emma for O level and for A level. Yeah. And I now think it is such a wonderful and subtle book. And one of the saddest things in it is this poor character, Miss Bates, who is very cruelly snubbed. And at the time, as a teenager, I just thought, oh, good, get her to shut up. We've had enough of her. And of course, I mean, this is this thing about the age and youth thing. I mean, now when you read it, it is absolutely incredibly poignant that this woman is treated so badly. This sort of very inoffensive, kindly soul is snubbed, and it's a really sad moment. But I just didn't have the wherewithal as a teenager to understand what was going on there.
Yes. I
also remember watching Dad's Army with my grandparents. So I was little, and I saw it as if it was a documentary. I didn't get any humour at all. And I thought the Arthur Lowe character, Captain Mannering, was just horrible and bossy and mean. And then sort of you see it much later and it's absolutely hilarious. But I just didn't have, because it's sort of sending up pomposity and kind of adult things like that. So, yeah, do you think you'll make time to read Mary Barton? Or
perhaps you remember it better than I do. Do you think I should? I have a suspicion perhaps I shouldn't. Perhaps but I don't know.
Maybe leave them. Maybe leave them. And what about when you were studying? What about poetry? Was there anything that grabbed you?
I think I'm a bit lacking the poetry gene, like I'm lacking the kind of the procedural gene. I don't quite have the brain for it. My other half has started writing poetry, and he clearly does have a penchant for it, which I don't have. I don't know. Perhaps he once bought me a book that was a poem for every day of the year, and I did manfully get through it. I read all 365, but most of them did kind of float slightly over my head. Probably not supposed to confess these things if you're a writer, but yeah, just being honest.
Oh well, never mind. I know that he's very interested in the poetry of Rumi.
Yes.
So yeah, he's definitely got the poetry gene. Okay. So bizarre feedback. I mean, this can be any aspect of your work. It could be, could even be your advertising work. And it also, I mean, feedback from anybody, a publisher, a friend, an agent, a parent, or whatever. So what have you come up with?
There was a particular incident about 8 or 9 years ago where I was visiting. I was going to go visit an elderly auntie of mine, and I knew for a fact she'd just read one of my books. She just read Light from Other Windows, which was a book that I was very proud of. But there's a particular plot element where one of the characters, it transpires, has got a slightly sordid past as an amateur porn star. And my auntie, who was 87, I just thought, oh, she's just read that. And I thought, when she tells much things for it, is this going to come up in the conversation or not? And how am I going to handle it if she does? And indefatigable as that generation is, she just was completely unfazed by it. And you realize that people of that generation have all been there. They've been through an awful lot worse things than we have. They've seen it all, and they're not fazed by things that we think will faze them. I think you said to me once, actually, and I'd never heard this before, but it's so true. Every generation thinks it invented sex. And of course we all do. We all think I know all about this. And it's so not true, and hasn't been for millennia, has it?
Which does bring us neatly back to Fenella and the sort of old young again, the kind of the way that it's structured. Some people thinking, well, that will I better not talk about that, and and they're all delightfully wrong in their assumptions about other people. So that's where the comedy lies. And also, Fenella's fair share, also not just the comedy, the kind of the real moments of poignancy and sadness that are definitely there as well. But what's great about Fenella and about her mum is that they carry on, they in their very different ways, they're determined to make the best of things. And
they bounce back from everything that life throws at them.
Yeah, exactly. And then if they possibly can change it, transform it, use it as a stepping stone. So it's a lovely book. It is published by Roundfire Books. And so don't be like Sarah Waters and leave us hanging for years and years and years for the next one. We demand number 6 as soon as you're ready. So thank you very much for joining me in the book bag, Chris Chalmers, and I shall see you soon.
Indeed. Bye-bye.
And thank you very much for joining us. Join me next time. I shall round up another writer to discuss. So one last time, Fenella's Fair Share, really good fun. That is me on the cover giving a little quote, which I was delighted to do. So see you next time. Thanks for watching.